President Yoon Suk Yeol is scheduled to sit down with his counterparts at the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Indonesia, as well as those of the Group of 20 in India, this week to address a host of issues related to stability and prosperity. So what is the focus of the President's latest diplomatic mission? How have Korea's ties with the ASEAN developed over the years? And is the G20 losing its relevance amid rampant geopolitical tensions? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. It's looking to be a busy week for the Yoon administration this week as the President is poised to partake in ASEAN-related summits in Indonesia and the G20 summit in India. Now, for more on his agenda, I have Doctor Kim Yang-gyu at the East Asia Institute. Dr. Kim, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I also have Kwon Soa with us. Soa, welcome back.
Hello, Sunny.
Right, then let's start here in the studio. So let's begin then with President Yoon Suk Yeol's overall agenda in Indonesia this week.
Sure. So President Yoon Suk Yeol's next overseas trip starts tomorrow, Tuesday, when he departs for Indonesia. And of his 7-day, 2-leg trip, the Southeast Asian country will make up 4 days. So let's take a look at the major events. President Yoon will be in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, for a series of ASEAN-related meetings. ASEAN, of course, standing for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Upon arrival on Tuesday, however, he'll first meet with Korean residents living in Indonesia. On Wednesday, the South Korea-ASEAN Summit takes place, as well as the ASEAN Plus 3 Summit that involves the ASEAN bloc and South Korea, Japan, and China. He'll also attend a Korea-ASEAN Youth Festival and gala dinner hosted by Indonesia on that day. Another major ASEAN event is the East Asia Summit on Thursday, where 18 countries will discuss security issues in the region and beyond. President Yoon is also set to hold a number of bilateral meetings on the sidelines, including with leaders of Malaysia and Singapore. A summit with his Indonesian counterpart Joko Widodo is scheduled as well at the presidential palace on Friday as part of an official bilateral visit to the country. Indonesia not only chairs the ASEAN meetings this year, but South Korea and Indonesia celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relations this year. A business seminar is also on Friday's schedule, although there will be no official economic delegation for this trip.
Right, I see. Dr. Kim, the ASEAN itself marks its 56th anniversary this year. Now, that being said, what have been some of the ASEAN's more notable milestones with South Korea over those years?
Well, a couple of things. South Korea had tried to establish the diplomatic relations with ASEAN since the 1970s, but it was only in 1989 that had established this relationship. And initially, it began as the sectoral dialogue relations, taking 2 years to evolve into full dialogue partner relations, and since then, bilateral relations have progressed rapidly. And in 2004, the ROK and ASEAN announced a joint declaration on comprehensive cooperation partnership, which was further elevated to a strategic partnership in 2010. And in 2012, South Korea established a mission to ASEAN in Jakarta and appointed the first resident ambassador, signifying a deepening of cooperation with ASEAN. And in 2017, then President Moon Jae-in unveiled a new Southern policy to enhance the partnership between ASEAN and South Korea, grounded in the principle of 3P, people, prosperity, and peace. In 2019, ASEAN and South Korea celebrated the 30th anniversary of bilateral relations with the commemorative summit held on November 25th and 26th in Busan. And efforts to strengthen ROK-ASEAN relations have persisted under the Yoon Suk Yeol government as well. The Yoon government initiated the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, or KASI, last year, and proposed elevating the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership by 2024. And given the significance of this region, I think ROK-ASEAN relations will develop even further in the coming years.
Right, indeed. And staying with what Dr. Kim has just said, Soa, the Yoon Suk Yeol administration proposed the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, I think back last November over in Cambodia. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular initiative?
Right. President Yoon Suk Yeol will put emphasis on South Korea's plan to push the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative in earnest, is what Kim Tae-hyo, Principal Deputy National Security Advisor, during a briefing on the upcoming overseas trip said last week. So President Yoon, back in November, was in Phnom Penh also for a series of ASEAN-related meetings where he had announced South Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy under his administration, focused on promoting freedom, peace, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. President Yoon vowed to achieve that through solidarity and cooperation with members of the ASEAN and other major nations. The Korean-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, or KASI, which has been announced on the same occasion, is part of this larger regional Indo-Pacific policy framework, but tailored towards ASEAN. The initiative represents an upgraded ASEAN policy, but also continued policy similar to the New Southern Policy launched by the former Moon Jae-in administration. KASI highlights ASEAN centrality, aims to strengthen strategic cooperation in political and security fields, in addition to the existing focus on economic, social, and cultural cooperation. And in more detail, this entails cooperation in environment, climate change, vaccines and biotechnology, and digital infrastructure. The latter with prospects for trade in electric vehicles, batteries, and digital technology. Now, on the occasion of President Yoon's stay in Jakarta, he is expected to announce plans on cyber and maritime security, as well as projects in the digital innovation field, according to the presidential office.
Right, ambitious plans right there, if I may say so myself. And that being said, Dr. Kim, simply speaking, what do you believe is the importance of South Korea's ties with the ASEAN amid the current climate, that is, of geopolitical tensions over security and, of course, trade?
Well, first I have to say the strategic location of the place, because it encompasses crucial sea routes like Strait of Malacca and South China Sea, and these routes account for approximately 64% of South Korea's oil imports and 46% of natural gas imports, making them essential for South Korea's energy security. And furthermore, this region's significance for South Korea's economy interest is underscored by some compelling statistics. With a collective population of around 660 million people, ASEAN ranks as the world's third most populous region. Its combined GDP of approximately $3.35 trillion US, positioning it as the fifth largest economy globally, set to become the fourth largest by 2030. ASEAN holds the status of being South Korea's second largest trading partner and investment destination, and its most preferred travel destination for South Korean people as well. Moreover, roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of South Korea's bilateral ODA goes to ASEAN every year. And considering the recent economic slowdown in China, ASEAN's significance for South Korea has grown even more. China appears to miss its official growth target of 5.5% this year, facing challenges such as falling consumer prices, a deepening real estate crisis, and escalating level of local government debt that constrain the Chinese government's capacity to stimulate growth and enhance public services. And reports suggest that youth unemployment in China has reached such a critical point that government has stopped publishing the data even. And given that China's economy grew at average rate of 9% annually from 2000 to 2019, it is evident that South Korea needs to explore alternative avenue for economic growth. And this makes ASEAN even more important for South Korea, offering a valuable pathway for economic growth and stability.
Right, I see. And so, as you mentioned earlier, President Yoon Suk Yeol is scheduled to sit down with his Indonesian counterpart, Joko Widodo, on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. Now, what's on their agenda, and what is the significance of Seoul's ties with Jakarta?
Right. Apart from the ASEAN meetings, the visit by President Yoon Suk Yeol and First Lady Kim Gun-hee, by the way, who's traveling with them, to Indonesia is part of an official bilateral visit coming on the back of the invitation of Indonesia's President Joko Widodo. And President Widodo himself and his wife, Iriana Joko Widodo, were in Seoul last year in July. So we can probably expect a continuation of talks made back then, when the two leaders agreed to cooperate on stabilizing supply chains, economic security issues, as well as defense and environment. Although there will be no official economic delegation for this overseas trip, as I mentioned, still, with some 40 executives traveling with the president, including Hyundai Motor Group Executive Chair Ui Sun-chung and also LG Group Chairman Gu Gwang-mo, Lotte Group Chairman Shin Dong-bin, talks about business exchange is expected to be on the agenda as well. And speaking of Hyundai Motor Group, actually, President Joko Widodo made a visit to Hyundai Motor Research Center when he was in Korea last year. Now, an economic aide at the presidential office noted that ASEAN and India make up 21% of South Korea's exports, highlighting sales diplomacy as an important part of bilateral summits with President Yoon's counterparts in Indonesia as well as India. And also what's worth mentioning is that Indonesia is the biggest economy among ASEAN countries. Presidents Yoon and Widodo are also expected to clinch a series of deals during their one-on-one.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim, in what direction should the Yoon administration seek to navigate its future ties with the ASEAN amid hopes of promoting Korea to play a more pivotal role in global affairs?
Right, this Yoon government's foreign policy direction, so-called global pivotal status, has actually centered around his effort to extend its commitment to global network of like-minded countries led by Washington, based on liberal values and norms. And interestingly, during the Camp David trilateral summit, the two documents adopted, like the spirit of Camp David and the Camp David principles, emphasize the importance of strengthening relations with ASEAN. And actually, ASEAN was mentioned before, even ahead of Taiwan and North Korea. And as explained by Ms. One, that under KASI, I think the Yoon government aims to deepen cooperation with ASEAN in several key areas like supply of critical materials, technical cooperation, development of future industries like e-mobility, batteries, and renewable energy, maritime cooperation and capacity building for counter piracy to ensure freedom of navigation, and collaboration in the defense industry, and of course, climate change. And ASEAN can help us diversify our supply chain for greater resilience and stability, while we can give them, help them building future industries and strengthening maritime law enforcement capabilities. So this is going to be a significant win-win game for both sides. So I think Yoon government will try to pursue this path.
Right, good to know. So moving forward now, let's touch upon the president's agenda in India for the G20 summit later this year, following his agenda in Indonesia, of course.
Sure. So following his trip focused on ASEAN, President Yoon will head to India's capital, New Delhi, to attend the G20 summit. This year also actually happens to be the year when India and South Korea are celebrating their 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties. So let's get a glimpse of what's been made public in terms of his schedule there. Again, just like in Indonesia, President Yoon plans to meet with Korean expats in India upon arrival on Friday before the main events over the weekend. Now, you'll probably notice here the Indonesia schedule was more detailed. Probably we'll get more precise information as the overseas trip starts. On Saturday, the president is slated to participate in 2 out of 3 G20 summit sessions under the big theme, One Earth, One Family, One Future. And the 3rd session will be on Sunday. A big focus of the upcoming G20 is climate change and environment. So President Yoon is expected to speak about Korea's role in efforts to overcome challenges in this field. Also on Sunday, the South Korean leader will visit a memorial at Gandhi National Park. Bilateral summits with not only his Indian counterpart, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, but also Spain, Argentina, and Mauritius are planned, as well as meetings with businesses. The one-on-ones, meanwhile, will serve as a means to drum up support from counterparts around the world for Busan's bid to host the 2030 World Expo. And that's also going to happen at the ASEAN sideline meetings. Principal Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Ye-hyo told a briefing last week that with the voting for the World Expo venue just 3 months away, Korea will actively make use of the bilaterals, which are also expected to increase in number along the way. Currently, 10 bilateral summits are fixed, but this number can grow.
Right, I see. And Dr. Kim, both the Russian and Chinese leaders are expected to be absent from the Group of 20 summit in India this time around as well. That is for the Russian president, of course. Now, that being said, do you suppose the G20 summit in itself is losing its relevance as widely believed by a number of pundits?
Well, the absence of Putin has been expected, and this is not his first time skipping an important international event. And the absence of Xi Jinping is a bit surprising, but I think it is possibly linked to the ongoing territorial dispute between China and India. But I have to say that it's difficult to say that G20 is losing its significance. Since its elevation to summit status in 2008 during the global financial crisis, the G20 has been positioned as the premier forum for global economic cooperation. It successfully facilitated major macroeconomic policy cooperation and helped mitigate the negative impact of the 2008 crisis. And collectively, the G20 still represent the approximately 80% of world's economic output, close to 75% of worldwide export, and about 60% of global population. And I think it'll be difficult to have alternative regime that could replace G20 in the short term. More interestingly, Washington had decided to send Vice President Harris to Jakarta for the ASEAN summit, while President Biden will participate in the G20 summit in New Delhi. And National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan mentioned during his press briefing on August 22nd that President Biden will reaffirm the U.S. commitment to the G20 by committing to host the G20 in 2026. He also announced that President Biden will present a value proposition to countries in the global south by discussing the modernization of multilateral development banks, including the World Bank and IMF, and increasing support to address the overlapping challenges the global south countries facing. Also, U.S. is in position of relative strength now, as it has successfully been managing the inflation to return to its target levels. And I doubt that Washington will simply sit back and watch as the fragmented G20 fails to achieve anything. It is likely become another arena where Washington and Beijing compete, particularly in areas such as who can provide better infrastructure development.
Right, I see. So there, as Dr. Kim mentioned, there seems to be quite a bit of media coverage about President Xi Jinping missing this year's G20 gathering in India. Could you explain that for us in a bit more detail then?
Sure. So according to an exclusive by Reuters late last week, sources familiar with the matter said that Chinese President Xi Jinping is likely to skip the G20 summit and that Premier Li Qiang is expected to represent China at the event. But reports also say it might even be someone else. China has not offered a stance on the issue yet. President Xi not showing off at the G20 Leaders Summit is very rare. In fact, it would be the first time that he would be missing the major multilateral event since taking power. He attended it in person from 2013 to 2019. Then, of course, came the COVID-19 pandemic. And in 2021, he didn't attend in person due to pandemic situations in China. This time, definitely, it's not a COVID issue. He just traveled to South Africa for the BRICS summit around 2 weeks ago. And media reporting on the news are citing mounting India-China relations as not mounting relations, but of course deteriorating relations as the reason for President Xi not attending the summit. China-India ties have been going downhill in the past 3 years or so due to territorial disputes or the line of actual control in the Himalayan region. They did agree to de-escalate those tensions when they met at the sidelines of the BRICS summit, but with President Xi likely not attending the G20 hosted by India, this will likely translate into further difficulties. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden on Sunday expressed his disappointment as he was hoping to see Xi in New Delhi. There are concerns that leaders will fail Yeol in adopting a joint communique for the first time due to the China-India tensions. And also another member, Russian President Vladimir Putin, won't be attending the meeting either. And but as Dr. Kim earlier mentioned, that is not as surprising as President Xi not coming.
Right, I see. And Dr. Kim, then, what more can you tell us about South Korea's ties with India?
Well, India, of course, is important player in South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy, because it's Indo-Pacific strategy. And it is identified as a leading regional partner with shared values, possessing the world's second largest, well, now its largest population, and cutting-edge IT and space technologies. And Seoul maintains a special strategic partnership with New Delhi. However, not much has been mentioned in the strategy document of South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy, except for this relatively short paragraph. It deserves our attention that Foreign Minister Park Jin's first official event was his meeting with the ambassadors of the ASEAN Committee in Seoul, and President Yoon outlined Seoul's Indo-Pacific strategy at the 23rd ASEAN-ROK Summit in 2022. Compared to this clear signaling of Yoon government's commitment to strengthening its relationship with ASEAN, India is relatively less emphasized. But South Korea and India share a lot in common. For instance, they both share the core values of democracy, and they both are neighbors of China, dealing with hostile neighbors like North Korea and Pakistan. And because of this, both Seoul and New Delhi need to manage their relationship with China in a balanced way, addressing the challenges that Beijing poses while not totally forsaking engagement with the PRC. So I hope this G20 summit in New Delhi achieve more tangible outcomes and institutionalize the more extended cooperation between the two countries in serving the interests of both nations.
Right, shared interests in peace and prosperity then. Dr. Kim, as always, thank you so much for your insights today. And so here in the studio, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow, that is Tuesday.